This is booked for drama, where stories burn, hearts break, the tea is always hot and never a part 2. Today we're diving into She Left with Nothing But Her Name. Let's go. Chapter 1. The day I found out I was pregnant again was the same day Trevor Ziegler promised me he'd quit gambling for good. I was so happy I cried. I took the crumpled envelope from under our mattress, the money I had scraped together over the past year driving cabs and skipping meals. I placed it in his hands like a prayer, hoping he'd finally build a future for us. He smiled, kissed my forehead, and told me I was the only woman he'd ever love. 10 minutes later, I found out I was the biggest joke of all. I chased after him, thinking he'd forgotten 2 bills on the table. But just outside, I saw him laughing with the very creditors who used to beat him bloody. They no longer looked like wolves. They looked like friends. Mr. Ziegler, one of them chuckled, slapping his back, so no more door breaking, huh? Trevor rubbed the back of his neck and glanced at the ring I had saved 6 months to buy. Then he said without shame, "She proved her loyalty. Hell, she even aborted our baby last year to help pay off my debt." My body froze, my stomach churned, but it wasn't over. A woman's voice chimed in sweetly. "That's not enough. Maybe she just cares about money. We won't know until she gives birth again." She leaned into him, pretty as a doll, lips curled into a smirk I knew all too well. Emma Howard, his precious childhood sweetheart. Trevor laughed softly and tapped her nose. "Fine, I'll keep the act going for another year. She won't leave me anyway." And that was the moment everything in me broke. I looked down at my belly barely showing and clutched the cash in my hand. He thought I'd stay no matter what. He thought I was too weak to leave. But if I could give up a child once for him, I could do it again this time, for me. After spending half the day at home, I finally booked the abortion appointment. But just as I confirmed it, the front door burst open. Trevor stepped in, brushing rain off his jacket and complaining, "Didn't I tell you to pick me up? Why didn't you come?" The living room went quiet. He paused, confused by the silence, and looked at me. Back then, I would have rushed to ease his anger with gentle words. But now, I had nothing to say. He watched me for a moment and then stepped closer. Before he could speak, I said, "Trevor, I don't have money for a prenatal checkup. Can I have my money back?" His face went blank, and I knew the reason. He gave the money away because he believed it was filthy. But I had saved it little by little. That cash carried more than other people's fingerprints, it carried my sweat and effort. I kept my expression steady, though I was falling apart inside. Silently, I begged him in my heart, "If you care, even just a bit, please be honest." But in the end, he let me down. Looking into my eyes, he mumbled, "I'm sorry, Chloe. I blew all the money gambling." The spark in my eyes slowly disappeared. At that moment, I almost felt grateful for how heartless he'd always been. It finally made my decision clear. Chapter 2. Trevor didn't think much of my silence. He assumed I wouldn't make a scene or argue with him. In the 5 years we were together, I did whatever work I could. To help cover his debts, I washed dishes and even hauled boxes for a moving service. That was how I lost my first baby. The load was too heavy for me. My legs gave out, and I fell with the cargo. When I regained consciousness, I was already in a hospital bed. I was scared he'd blame himself, so I told him I had chosen to get rid of the baby. "This book has been added to your bookshelf." As I came back to my senses, I saw a fraction of smugness cross his eyes. He handed me a live fish and said, "Emma is craving your cooking. Make this for her." Blood covered his hands, and I just froze. He'd always avoided touching raw meat. Even when I was expecting, he never bought me anything nourishing. I never held it against him. But now, he was willing to do it for Emma Howard. He didn't even remember that the smell of fish made me sick when I was expecting. The nausea hit fast, and I ran straight to the bathroom. The fish slipped from Trevor's hand and hit the floor, but he didn't seem to care. He came after me and gently patted my back. "Chloe, are you all right?" I pushed his hand away and answered calmly, "It's fine." His hand hung awkwardly in the air. He was clearly upset that I kept turning him down. He stared at me for a moment. When I didn't say anything, he sneered, slammed the door, and left. That night, I didn't worry about where he went. I didn't call or wait up. I slept peacefully until morning. The surgery was planned for the following Tuesday, so I went back to driving my taxi like usual. I once had a stable job. But ever since I borrowed money to help Trevor pay his debts, I had no choice but to take on whatever small gigs I could find. Snapping back to reality, this book has been added to your bookshelf. Getting into my taxi by the roadside. He wouldn't stop talking the whole ride. He kept leaning forward and touching me from the backseat. His breath reeked of alcohol, and it made me feel sick. My face went pale. I hit the brakes, jumped out, and threw up under a nearby tree. He ran after me, scolding, "Look what you did. My clothes are soaked. Give me $10. He kept yanking me back and forth. In the middle of it, I suddenly realized the car was parked right outside Trevor's company. 5 years ago, he claimed he was broke and had signed the house over to someone else. But now, that story doesn't seem real anymore. Right then, the giant screen above the entrance turned on, showing a video of Trevor throwing a birthday party for Emma. She looked overjoyed, standing in the middle of the crowd while people cheered and handed her flowers. Trevor smiled warmly and placed an expensive necklace around her neck. The drunk man noticed my expression and scoffed. "What are you staring at? You think someone like you could be the wife of a big shot?" I glanced down in a daze. I was wearing a $2 vest, $3 shoes, pants that fuzzed easily, and my hands were dry and worn. I touched my chest as tears welled up in my eyes. My voice trembled. "I don't have $10. His eyes moved lower as he grabbed my wrist and said, laughing, "No money? Then spend the night with me instead." My hands shook with rage as I reached for my phone to call the cops. He instantly snapped out of it, panic taking over. He backed off, but not before dumping a cold, half-finished cola over my head. He spat on the ground and said with disgust, "Now we're even. What bad luck to run into someone like you." Then, he staggered off down the street. I stood in the crowd, soaked and shivering. When I looked up, I caught a glimpse of a familiar silhouette behind the floor-to-ceiling window. Chapter 3. I wiped off the mess and got back in the taxi like nothing had happened. After driving all day, I came home that night burning with a fever. When I stepped inside, I realized they were throwing a birthday party for Emma. A bunch of Trevor's close friends were there. Emma was the center of attention like a princess. The moment I walked in, the room went quiet. The atmosphere was awkward. Trevor came over, handed me a microphone, and said, "It's Emma's birthday. Sing something." My head was spinning, and I felt awful. All I wanted was to lie down. I pulled away from him and shook my head. His face darkened. Emma glanced at me and said generously, "It's fine. If Chloe doesn't want to, then don't force her." Tyler Robinson, sipping his drink nearby, let out a whistle like he admired her kindness. I didn't want to make a scene. I dragged myself toward the bedroom. When I turned around, my eyes landed on a piece of clothing tossed in the corner, stained and dirty. My heart dropped, and I stood still. That was the little shirt I had made for my first baby. I even cut the fabric and stitched it. Nobody noticed my distress. Trevor just kept watching Emma talk, his eyes soft. It wasn't until I stood in front of them holding the shirt that they finally glanced my way. As soon as Trevor saw what I was holding, he quickly pulled me close and spoke gently. "Emma used it to clean something by mistake. She didn't mean to. We can just buy more." I slowly turned to look at him. All I saw in his eyes was a desire to avoid conflict. He didn't understand the pain I felt as a mother, even though I was his wife. The grievances I'd held in for days suddenly burst out, and tears streamed down my face. Trevor froze and hesitantly reached out to wipe my tears, but I turned away. Emma looked annoyed when I ruined her perfect moment. Still, she forced herself to act kind. With fake tears, she said, "Chloe, don't take it out on Trevor. It's my fault. I'll buy you something to make up for it." Her words set Kyler off. He clicked his tongue, pulled out a wad of cash, and tossed it in front of me with disdain. "It's just money. Why make such a big deal?" The way they spoke and acted made it clear they looked down on me. To them, I was never someone worth being close to. I used to feel inferior and ashamed, always trying to win their approval in silence. But now, I just felt lucky. I kicked the money aside and headed to the bathroom, holding the shirt tightly. Trevor gave me a bunch of explanations, but I turned them all down. Frustrated, he snapped, "Chloe, stop blaming us for how others treat you." My mind went blank, and I lifted my head to stare at him. Right after, he quickly dodged his gaze in panic. So it was indeed him by the window earlier. He had seen that drunk man humiliate me. I laughed, not because I was sad, but because I felt a strange sense of relief. Trevor's eyes darted nervously. For some reason, he suddenly panicked. He reached out like he wanted to touch me. But before he could, I lost consciousness and fell. The last thing I saw was his face filled with panic. Chapter 4. When I came to, the first thing I heard was Trevor and Emma arguing. "I can't pretend anymore. Didn't you hear what the doctor said? She's not getting enough nutrients. If that keeps up, she might lose the baby. It's our second child. I won't risk anything happening to her." His voice broke with emotion. She was still working while burning up with a fever. If the doctor hadn't come, the baby. Emma pouted and replied with a shrug, "Chloe is tough. You're just overreacting." He immediately snapped, "Shut up. I missed so many chances because I kept listening to you." Emma froze. Her eyes filled with tears as she bit her lip and cried quietly. At that moment, she hated me even more. Everything she thought she deserved had been taken away by someone who came in halfway. Anger burned in her, and she was about to say something again, but Trevor had already rushed to my side. He gently touched my cheek and said, "You're awake, Chloe. How are you feeling?" When I didn't answer, he hesitated, then said seriously, "There's something I need to tell you. Actually, I want a divorce." Whatever he planned to say got stuck in his throat. He stood there in shock before finally managing to speak. "Why, just because of a shirt?" Emma rolled her eyes and stirred things up even more. "Chloe, are you embarrassed because Trevor doesn't have money? Is that why you changed your mind? You can't be so impulsive just for a little money." She criticized me like she was so righteous, all while wearing a designer outfit and flashy jewelry. Meanwhile, I was expecting and couldn't even afford vitamins for my baby. Trevor didn't seem to care about any of that. He just grabbed my arm and asked with red eyes, "Is what she said true?" I laughed at how heartless and foolish he was. I simply accepted their accusations, nodded, and replied sarcastically, "Why would I cling to a guy who's irresponsible, loves gambling, and can't stay loyal?" Trevor turned pale. He looked at me over and over, sounding hurt. "Chloe, I never thought you were this kind of person." Without another word, he turned around, slammed the door, and left. Emma flashed a smug grin at me, clearly looking down on me, then strutted off. I didn't feel sad or happy. I calmly got out of bed and began packing my things and important papers. A few hours later, fireworks exploded over the river outside the window. Emma posted on Instagram right after. "Thank you, my dearest Trevor. I'll always be your princess." In the photo, fireworks filled the sky, and a giant pink diamond sparkled in the middle. The comments underneath were from their acquaintances. "They're such a perfect pair. Mr. Ziegler always spoils Emma. When will he dump that awful woman? She's such a drag. She's so gross. Just looking at her makes me sick. I totally agree with Mr. Ziegler getting a divorce. Anyway, we've had enough laughs already. I kept scrolling without a word. Before, they would hide those kinds of posts from me. Now, they made sure I saw every bit of it. Trevor clearly allowed it. He wanted me to regret everything, to realize what I had lost. He acted like a hidden predator, waiting for the day I'd crawl back and beg without pride, just like I used to for so long. But I didn't react. I tapped twice on the screen and erased both of their contacts. Then, a notification popped up. My surgery was scheduled for tomorrow. Chapter 5. When I woke up the next morning, Trevor had flooded my phone with messages. I had deleted WhatsApp but forgot to block his number. He sounded drunk. His messages were slurred and emotional. Are you seriously ignoring me? Do you even know who I am? You'll regret this. Even if you beg, I'll never forgive you. Why won't you answer? Don't you care that I didn't go home? Chloe, are you okay? Please just reply. I didn't bother reading the rest. I calmly looked away, grabbed the prepared documents, and headed to the hospital. Before the surgery, Trevor suddenly called. The ringtone sounded rapidly and panic-stricken like he had found out something. I stayed still, letting the phone ring again and again until the nurse finally called my name. That was when I shut it off. As my eyes closed, the only thing I felt was peace. Trevor woke up hungover. The first thing he did was reach for his phone and dial Chloe's number. He'd stormed off in anger and done a bunch of reckless things. Now that the alcohol had worn off, guilt hit him hard. He just prayed she hadn't seen it all. Frustrated, he ran his fingers through his hair and stared at the phone, but all he got were busy signals. His chest tightened. He threw on a jacket and dashed outside. Emma, who always kept an eye on his mood, noticed right away. She followed him, but by the time she got to the door, his car was already gone. She stomped in frustration, yelling loudly after him. Trevor didn't hear a word. He kept driving while placing an order for steak, flowers, and jewelry, then headed home in a rush. But when he walked in, the house was empty. The hope that had been growing inside him suddenly crashed. Still, he told himself Chloe was probably just working. He figured he'd fix up the place a bit and tell her everything when she came back. She had always been patient and rarely got mad. He believed if he apologized, she would forgive him. Feeling reassured, he started setting things up. But soon, he realized no matter how he tried to make the place look better, it still looked shabby. Trevor stopped. All he could see was old furniture and cracked paint. Then, his eyes landed on a tiny shirt hanging on the balcony. It was once beautiful but is now stained. His chest ached, and a heavy sadness settled over him. At last, he understood what Chloe must have gone through. Trevor kept his head down. Then, the doorbell suddenly rang. He jumped up and hurried to answer it. But the person standing there wasn't the one he hoped for. Chapter 6. Trevor's expression turned cold. Why are you here? He blamed Emma. If she hadn't stirred things up yesterday, he wouldn't have argued with Chloe. She had taken advantage of his drunken state and pushed him to act without thinking. Even though he was angry, Emma still stepped closer. She had no idea what was going on. Dressed up with perfect makeup, she caught sight of the necklace on the table and froze mid-sentence. With quick steps, she walked over, jealousy flashing in her gaze. Her eyes stayed fixed on the blue gem. Just as she reached out to touch it, Trevor grabbed it away. His voice was cold as he said, "Wasn't the pink diamond I gave you yesterday enough? Stop reaching for what isn't yours." Emma's cheeks turned red as if she'd been exposed. She quickly tried to explain, stuttering, "Trevor, I only did this for you. Chloe is greedy for money. If you give her something so valuable now, she might want even more later." "Oh, like you did?" Emma froze. The sarcasm in his voice cut her deep. Trevor snorted coldly. He'd let her fill his head with nonsense for years, and that was how everything ended up like that. Every time he tried to treat Chloe better, Emma would get in the way. The guilt inside him burned like fire in his chest. He had always treated Emma like a princess, so she felt wronged. She was irritated and upset. Her high heels were making her feel worse. Frustrated, she knocked the coat off the chair and snapped, "This place is disgusting. How am I supposed to sit here?" Trevor shoved her aside. "No one told you to." Wearing a cold expression, he picked up Chloe's coat and carefully brushed the dust off. His eyes started to water. The coat felt coarse and worn out, probably not even worth $10. Then he glanced at Emma. Her dress cost thousands, and he had paid for it. He quickly turned his gaze away. Just then, something slipped out of Chloe's coat and fell to the floor. Trevor froze for a second, then picked up the paper. When he unfolded it, his face turned pale. Emma saw his reaction and leaned in to read the paper. It was for an abortion. Her eyes lit up, and a smile crept across her face. But before she could say anything, Trevor slapped her so hard she collapsed. Emma hit the ground, her vision went dark, and blood spilled from her lips. Trevor didn't even spare her a glance. With a grim face, he stormed out the door. His hands trembled as he gripped the wheel. He slammed the gas pedal down, refusing to stop. Even the tiniest chance mattered now. 20 minutes later, his car screeched to a stop. He kicked the door open and stumbled toward the hospital entrance. Drivers behind him who nearly crashed cursed at him, but he didn't hear a word. He grabbed the nearest nurse and asked desperately, "Is there someone named Chloe Lloyd here?" Seeing his wild look, the nurses assumed he was drunk and kept their distance. Eventually, he reached the obstetrics and gynecology department. A nurse walked over and asked, "What's your relationship with her?" "She just finished the surgery and is resting now." Trevor stood frozen. Everything in front of him seemed to blur and disappear. The room spun wildly, and he collapsed to the ground. Chapter 7. When I opened my eyes again, all I could see was bright, blinding white. The aching and heaviness in my body reminded me that a life had left my body. After resting for hours, I slowly got up. When I looked toward the door, I saw Trevor standing there. Even though we were a few steps apart, his sadness hit me like a strong wind. His chapped lips parted slightly, but he didn't speak. I quietly looked away and started packing my belongings. A moment later, his finger hooked around mine. It was our usual way of making peace. I paused and looked at him, confused by his attempt to pretend nothing had happened. Trevor gently took the things from my hands and continued packing in silence. His tears dripped onto my white coat before he finally broke down, covering his face as he cried. I stood still and watched him. It was nothing like what I had expected. I thought he would yell, accuse me of being heartless, or demand a divorce and push me out with nothing. But he didn't say any of that. He just sat there crying. I pulled out a tissue and handed it to him. As soon as he took it, I suddenly said, "Let's get divorced." Trevor looked up sharply. His voice was raspy and rough, but firm. "No way. What did you know?" I knew the truth now, though my suspicions had started long before that day. Why did he owe gambling debts but still spend freely? Why did his parents overseas never ask about him? Why did people from all kinds of backgrounds still stick by him? I wasn't stupid. I just loved him too much, so I ignored the warning signs and kept making excuses. But once the truth was out, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. A man like that didn't deserve me. When I said nothing, he suddenly pulled me into his arms and whispered shakily, "It's over now. Let's just move on and live well." How could I live well after everything? I wanted to speak, but he covered my mouth as if he already knew what I was going to say. Trevor brought me back home with a dark expression. But as soon as he opened the door, Emma stormed over, looking hurt. He quickly stepped aside, grabbed her arm, and shoved her out before locking the door. Emma stood outside in shock, then started pounding on the door furiously. "Trevor, did she say something to turn you against me? Don't listen to her. I'm the one who truly loves you. She's just tricking you. I'm your perfect match. She only wants your money." Suddenly, the door swung open with a loud bang. Chapter 8. Trevor stared at her sullenly, his patience completely gone. "Who do you think you are, Emma? Haven't I made myself clear? You used my money before, and I let it slide. But now, I've had enough. Get lost and don't show up again." Emma was stunned. She had grown up in a poor household. Trevor's father had sponsored her, so she worked hard to stay close to the family. She acted humbly and always did what they expected, just to be accepted. But then, Chloe showed up. She didn't have a better background and didn't even have parents. Emma couldn't accept it. If someone like Chloe could be with Trevor, why not her? So, she did everything she could to drive them apart. But in the end, none of it worked. Reality slapped her in the face. She burst into tears, hoping Trevor would forgive her like he used to. He looked away with frustration, grabbed her arm, and pulled her out. They exchanged words, and her wild voice echoed through the neighborhood. When Trevor returned, I was quietly packing my things. His eyes narrowed as he yanked the clothes from my hands. "Where are you going?" I pulled out a document and said once more, "I want a divorce." Trevor's face turned pale. He suddenly realized that I wasn't just saying it out of anger. He stared straight at me. There was no joy or no sadness, just emptiness, like I had lost all hope in life, in everything, even in him. Trevor grew anxious. Without thinking, he snatched the papers and ripped them apart. "I'll fix this. Believe me, with time, everything will fade away. Once you get used to your new life, the past will start to blur and maybe even vanish." "Even the baby?" The air turned still. I asked again, not caring what might happen. "Yes," Trevor said, his voice low and eyes red. Losing those 2 kids had hurt him deeply, but he never blamed me. That was why he couldn't understand why I couldn't let it go. I nodded, stayed quiet, and drifted off to sleep. Soon after, Trevor moved me into a villa. He worked during the day while I sat around, lost in thought. If he didn't speak to me first, I wouldn't say a word. He got frustrated and started ignoring me on purpose. Over time, he realized something wasn't right. I had no appetite, kept falling asleep, and drank way too much. He eventually snapped and tried to talk to me, but we ended up yelling at each other. "I give you a good life, and this is how you repay me." I glanced at all the fancy clothes and jewelry around me, then stood up and destroyed them one by one in silence. Trevor didn't try to stop me. He just leaned on the doorframe, smiled, and watched coldly. "Go on. Destroy it all. I'll just buy more later." He said it like it meant nothing. This kind of life went on for about a month until the day Emma barged in. Chapter 9. After a few months, she looked different, no longer glowing or pretty like before. Dark circles were showing under her eyes. Emma glared at me with envy, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "So you think you've made it and turned into some fancy rich woman? Don't get ahead of yourself. If I wanted to, I could easily win Trevor back," she said, smirking proudly. "I contacted all your old workplaces back then and told your bosses to make things hard for you. You like suffering, right? You used to act like you were proud of it. Why stop now?" She was breathing hard, clearly working up. I stayed quiet, just watching her get closer. Then, without warning, I pushed her down the stairs. Her face twisted in fear as she lost balance. She screamed while falling, rolling down. Her legs bent awkwardly as she hit the floor. I listened to her cries, turned away, and quietly walked back to my room. The maid called Trevor. He rushed home, but instead of going to Emma, he came straight to check on me. He saw me calmly brushing my hair in front of the mirror. That scared him more than anything else. The next day, he took me to the hospital. The doctor said I had moderate depression. He stayed silent for a long time. I, who was always quiet, suddenly became restless. When I saw a child in the corridor, I tried to run toward him. Trevor reacted fast and hugged me tightly. Chloe, please wake up. Can't we just live a normal life? His tears landed on my neck as he clung to me like someone drowning, grabbing the last thing he could. I suddenly felt calm and repeated, let's get divorced. After a long pause, he gave a slow nod. Somehow, Emma found out we were splitting up. The next day, she showed up leaning on a cane, smirking. Chloe, see? Trevor didn't visit me, but he still left you because of me. That proves you're nothing compared to me in his heart. She stared around the fancy house with greedy eyes, laughing loudly. Everything here is going to be mine now, every bit of it. She stared at me smugly, clearly waiting for my reaction. You must be sad now. You look calm, but I know you're full of hate. Just face it, this is what you deserve. No matter what you do, it won't change a thing. After hearing her ramble, I asked calmly, why would I feel sad? She scoffed exaggeratedly with disdain. Still acting tough? Fine, keep lying to yourself. As she touched the antiques with joy, I spoke slowly. Trevor gave me half of what he owns, including this place. Honestly, I feel great. Emma froze. She turned to me awkwardly, like her neck was stuck, and her face turned pale. What did you say? He gave you what? I just looked at her without replying. She lost it and tried to attack me, but she exerted too much force, making her cane fly and causing her to crash onto the floor. This can't be true. Someone like you doesn't deserve. Shut up. Trevor cut her off sharply as he rushed in. He glared at the guards at the entrance. What are you waiting for? Get her out of here. Chapter 10. Trevor grabbed my shoulder, his eyes filled with concern. Chloe, are you all right? I just shook my head and went back inside. Even though the divorce was final, he only asked me to stay in New York. But my legs belonged to me, and no one could stop me from walking away. So, while he was at work, I packed my things and got on a plane. The moment I left New York, it felt like I could finally breathe. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing, so I just turned it off. He lied to me for years, and I only lied to him once. I didn't owe him anything. 6 hours later, I landed in the city where I'd grown up. I went to the orphanage where I'd spent part of my childhood and adopted a little girl. She was 6 and shy, so much like I used to be. She was so well behaved that it tugged at my heart. So, I held her hand and took her everywhere, not caring about money or what others might think. As I helped her heal, I found that she was also helping me heal. During a follow-up at the hospital, the doctor said my illness wasn't gone yet, but it had become very manageable. I felt joy bubbling inside and hugged Sky. That night, she called me, Mommy, for the first time. I was shocked for a few seconds, then tears rushed down my face. The heart I thought would never feel anything again suddenly beat with warmth. Sky reached up and wiped my tears with her tiny fingers. Don't cry, Mommy. I'll love you forever. I hugged her tightly and whispered back, me too. Our days passed quietly but felt full of meaning. Then one afternoon, Sky hesitated before speaking, her fingers pulling at her clothes. Mommy, there's a man who keeps giving me candies. I don't want them, but he won't stop. He told me not to tell you. I stopped eating and asked calmly, when did it start? About 2 weeks ago, she replied. I knew instantly who it was. All the strange things that had happened lately began to make sense. I finally knew why small gifts kept showing up by the door and why my neighbors always brought over tasty food. Even though I didn't go out much, people were kind to me. I appreciated it, but I hadn't paid attention to who was behind it all. As those thoughts sank in, I let out a sigh. That evening, when Sky came out of school, I saw Trevor right there. He was holding an emerald bracelet and was about to place it on Sky's wrist. When he saw me, his smile froze. Once I got Sky safely into the car, I walked back and tossed the bread back at him. Don't come here again, I said firmly. Trevor gave a weak smile. I didn't mean to disturb your life. I just wanted to be nearby. I wasn't trying to. You've already disturbed me. I cut in, my voice steady. You stepped my voice steady. You stepped into my life without asking. We're not together anymore, remember? His expression went pale. We can start over. I believe that if I show real regret, we'll still have a good future. Maybe even kids. When he mentioned kids, I interrupted him again. I'm not getting married again, and I won't have more children. Sky is my only one. Your family wouldn't accept you not having any. Tiredness showed in my face. I looked at him firmly and said, Trevor, please let me go. I made it through this time, but I might not next time. Trevor stood there, stunned by the meaning of my words. He was scared. He wasn't willing to risk it. After staying quiet for a while, he looked up with a bitter but sincere smile. Chloe, I won't bother you anymore. But I'll wait until you change your mind. Then, he walked away. I let out a long breath. Sky grabbed my hand and said, Mommy, let's go home. I smiled. Yes, let's go home. From now on, I am ready to live a happy life. The end. And that's a wrap on today's reading here at Booked for Drama. If you felt anything, rage, swoon, secondhand heartbreak, let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share with your fellow drama lovers. If you have any requests, drop them in the comments. Until next time, keep reading, and keep the drama on the page.